Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Andy.
Thank you very, very much for agreeing to do this interview. I know you're extremely busy. Can we start by my asking you to introduce yourself, please?
Of course, yes. I'm Rachel Kearton. I'm the Deputy Chief Constable of Suffolk Constabulary. During the last few months, while we've been dealing with the COVID situation, I've been chairing a multi-agency group on behalf of the public sector in Suffolk, and that's a number of different organisations represented at that, and I've just had the honour of pulling those together and being the chair of that group.
Thank you. Thanks for setting the scene. I've got 4 questions for you, and the first one tends to be a common one because it's about leadership and it's about yourself as well. So how have you been looking after yourself during the pandemic, and how have you supported your teams?
This is such an important part of what we've all been doing, and it reminds me of something in policing where we, in police training, try and emphasise to staff that the most important phase is looking after oneself first in order to help other people. So if you're at a road traffic incident, then putting on a yellow jacket and looking after yourself before you actually deal with the incident is the most important part, because if you get injured, nobody's there to help. So absolutely, I have been looking after myself, trying to make sure that I make space and time for exercise, for good sleep, the usual things, the diet. But in the last few weeks and months, it's been about trying to take annual leave as well. So as we've settled into a period of the summer and as things around the COVID situation have established a bit more of a normality, then I've taken some holiday. So I'm very pleased to say I've just come back after 2 weeks off, but also trying to encourage other people to take that holiday and get away from work, disconnect from the technology and have a bit of time with families and friends.
Brilliant. It's so important to look after yourself. And I remember police training, and I remember that specific kind of scenario where almost everyone fails to begin with, don't they? Because they jump into the situation, don't they?
The temptation is to be the saviour, but by being a saviour of oneself, we can save other people.
Exactly. What about teams? So I know you've taken a break, which is really difficult to know when to do that. So how have you been supporting your teams during the pandemic?
So supporting the teams is we've got an excellent workplace health team unit here that advise on things like how to eat sensibly, take time off, talk to each other, not maybe in the way that we have previously around traumatic incidents. So the classic is the police canteen type environment, or over a cup of tea sitting down and saying, I've had a hard day. That isn't so easily available at the moment. So getting people to use the technology positively. We have encouraged people where necessary to work from home. If they can work from home, we're very well set up for that. And again, brilliant ICT team who have facilitated the technology to make that possible. So again, a lot of people will know the police service as the uniform wearing frontline people that walk the streets and drive the cars, and they are definitely out there doing that piece of our business. But there's a large proportion of our staff that actually work behind the scenes in offices doing really important administrative work, and they are able to do that from home, and we've been very supportive of that.
Brilliant. Thank you. And it's always worthwhile remembering those behind the scenes. Absolutely. My second question is this: how have policing services adapted to support our communities during this time?
We, as I say, been doing a lot of work with communities, and it is at times like this that the communities will often turn to the police as the font of all knowledge, which has been incredibly difficult at times because we're all dealing with something that's completely new. And so we have been trying to communicate first and foremost, trying to engage with our various different communities around what the restrictions or guidance has been from government, and to be that voice of explanation, that and very often that face-to-face voice of explanation that says, this is the reason why some of these restrictions have been put into place. This is the reason why we might be asking you not to gather on the streets or not to be spending time outside in mixed groups, and to encourage people for their health and for the good of everybody to, during the period of lockdown, to return to their homes or live within the restrictions and guidance they've been given. So the police have been spending a lot of time in different communities passing that message on, reassuring communities. This is, the thinking and the reasoning behind it might not be something that we're all that keen on, but you know what, if we do it the right way, then we'll get through it. And I do think sometimes we can read it, we can hear it on the news, we can watch it on TV. Sometimes some communities really need that face-to-face communication. So one of the examples of this has been we've had some of our non-English native speaking communities. We have brought in both police officers and people from elsewhere in the community to interpret for us, so that we can be assured that the messaging is getting across in a way that they understand, but also spending time with some of our vulnerable people that would naturally have contact with organisations and charities. During lockdown, that support mechanism was taken away from them. I'm thinking particularly victims of domestic abuse and the child protection. All of our children suddenly went home. Now, for the majority of our children, that's a safe environment to be. For a very, very few, that's not where they want to be, and it's their teachers that they turn to for that support. So we've put into place a number of initiatives to try and reassure them and open up communication routes elsewhere, supported by people like our supermarkets who have been open, and a number of those victims have been going to those places that have been able to give them messages and communicate on our behalf, so that we stay in touch with that vulnerable group of people.
That's really good. I mean, what you started off by saying is there's a phrase that's been coined by Fanwell Muttenbury from Ipswich and Suffolk Constabulary Racial Equality. He said the pandemic has made novices out of experts, overnight, and it's very true, isn't it? So your work in collaboration with the communities, because the recognition that you can't do it on your own, is really, really insightful.
And really well supported by the likes of Fanwell and many of our other partnerships that we've got in Suffolk. And again, that's one of the huge benefits of working in a place like Suffolk, where community is at the forefront, that we are so well linked in to start with and supported by so many people like Fanwell and his team as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. My third question is this: what are you most proud of in the way Suffolk Constabulary has responded during the crisis?
I've really seen a step up in our obvious professionalism to the service that is being provided to our communities. So I'm really proud of, first and foremost, how our police service in Suffolk has been available, ready, and to take on that role of being the organisation that holds together when others are not too sure. So we have had to become the experts overnight. We have had to be on the streets, and when everybody else was locked down, I've never had easier journeys into work. We have been the ones on the streets. We have been the ones travelling into offices when we've had to. Police officers in uniform that are interacting with the communities every day, they still carried on. We didn't see a reduction. In fact, we actually had a reduced level of sickness amongst our frontline staff. They wanted to come into work, and it was palpable in terms of their enthusiasm to do their bit to get through some of the difficult times and be on hand for those communities and families and people who were feeling perhaps a little less sure about where we were heading. So really proud of that sense of we can do this and we'll do it together on behalf of our communities. So responding really quickly to the guidance. So, sometimes we would hear, as everyone else, the announcements over government, over the media, this is what's happening, these are the restrictions. That would be the first information that the police service would receive, and we would have to respond in less than 24 hours as to what that meant to delivering that, telling people what that meant, helping people through the changes that it might mean to businesses, what they were allowed to do, what they weren't allowed to do. And don't forget, the police service are still a section of key workers. So we may, in many times, not be the most popular key workers. We don't do it for a popularity purpose. We do it because it needs to be done. And sometimes that means doing something that's maybe not so popular, but those key workers are still working nights. They're still going home, having to do their shopping at supermarkets and all of the other things. Quite often, a number of my team have had sick relatives at home, have had to take themselves off to places where they have had to isolate themselves, not because they are infected or that they are living with a family member who is infected, but because they want to carry on working. They have lived away from their families because of the risk of infection, and they've carried on coming to work and separated themselves from their loved ones in order to do that. So that gives me an immense feeling of pride when I look to see how they've responded. It is, of course, what police service trains to do. That's what I would hope Suffolk public expect of the police, but it's great when I see it in action.
I can feel the pride coming through the screen, Rachel. And it's when the police comes to its own, doesn't it? In an emergency. You're right. And you've given some excellent examples as well. And the realism of all the key workers putting their lives at risk, literally, during this time, was recognised when the collapse on Thursday nights became more broadened beyond just the NHS, and it was a recognition about all those other people that were putting themselves in that front line for their communities, for their families, and in their work.
Yeah, and that's wonderful to see. And as I say, we don't do it in order to get that recognition, but that recognition is certainly gratefully received.
And that takes us on to the last question, which is in a way with an eye on the future. What learning do you think, and also challenges, I suppose, do you think come from the outbreak?
I think there's some very practical learning that as an organisation of a large number of people, 2,000 odd people, that there are some changes that we have made that we will never go back to where we were before. So overnight, there has been a cultural change in Suffolk Police from what we had previously as flexible working that may have been seen as something that a few people do, but actually, you know, it's a necessity, but we'd rather you didn't, to a mindset change that says, absolutely, if you can work from home and deliver and produce the same level or better, as I've seen numerous times over the last few months, then we support agile working, and that will be a way forwards, using technology to support that and all the modern systems that we have to deliver a better service and more efficiently as well. We have taken the opportunity, again, internally as an organisation, to review a number of our meeting structure and some of the bureaucracy that probably any size organisation like ours can become overwhelmed by. It has been a moment of pause in our organisation to say, do we really need to do that? Why do we do that? What's the purpose behind that? Can we do it better? And we've definitely taken a big step forwards in that. More externally, looking at the impact of what we deal with, so crime particularly, but also, as I said earlier, vulnerability amongst a number of our local communities. The recession and the impact of the economy is something that we will feel within policing. So sadly, we will see some people in our communities struggling now because of the impact that the COVID situation has had on their business and their lives, their jobs. And sometimes, occasionally, that can drive people closer towards crime. It can also increase the number of people that are likely to become victims. So we're very cognizant of that and very aware that that possibility of increased crime could be over the horizon, and something that we are busy working on now to try and horizon scan, anticipate what that looks like, and doing our bit within Suffolk to support businesses getting back to normal as well, so that we can help and give reassurance to those people that the economy will take off eventually.
It's very insightful. Rachel, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.